Okay, so the other day I got a text message from a friend of mine who was asking about ISO boxes. He's thinking about building one for his home studio setup. And he asked me, how much of an effect does the ISO box have on the overall sound and tone of your guitar amp? And I thought, I don't actually know. See, I've been using an ISO box to record guitar parts for the better part of 5 years now. And I've also been recording guitars outside of ISO boxes, but I've never actually done a head-to-head comparison to see what difference there was between an ISO box and recording in a room. I also get questions about my ISO box here on the channel quite a bit. People reach out to me on Instagram and here in the comments section. How do you build an ISO box? How did you build the ISO box that you're using? So today I'm going to take you through how I built my ISO box, what I use it for, and we're going to find out what sounds better, recording in an ISO box or in an actual room. We're going to use the same amp, the same guitar, the same microphones mic'd up exactly the same to try and minimize as many variables as possible. And then we're going to listen and try and figure out what sounds better. I genuinely don't know, which is actually kind of surprising because I've been using this ISO box for years and it could be totally wrecking my sound. Although that's pretty unlikely because most of what you've heard me play on this channel has been recorded in that ISO box. So before we get into the comparison, let me quickly take you over to my homemade ISO box, talk about how we built it, what we did, and what I would do differently today if I was building another one. So this is my homemade ISO box. It lives over here in the corner amongst the Christmas decorations and hot water heater. You don't ever really see it on the channel, and that's by design. I want it tucked away, out of the way. The construction was really simple. It's just a box made of 1/2-inch MDF with a couple of different types of insulation layered inside it. Before we insulated it, we sealed up all of the seams inside the box with normal bathroom caulk. My idea was to try and make the box as airtight as possible, and that's actually one of the things I would change if I was building this box again. Because the box is essentially sealed, it vibrates and looks like it's going to shake itself apart. It hasn't yet, but I think it could. And I'm also slightly worried that it might be causing some kind of added wear and tear to the speakers, although I'm not sure about that. So if you know more about this, let me know in the comments section down below. The other thing I would do differently is to add some type of ventilation for combo amps. Now today we're going to be using the Tweed Deluxe for our comparison, and that amp gets relatively warm. So when I'm recording with that amp in the ISO box, every couple of minutes I have to remind myself to come over and open the lid to let it air out and cool down. I haven't had any problems with the amp overheating or anything like that, but I would like to have some kind of ventilation with maybe a computer fan or something that would just be moving air inside the box. The main two types of insulation are a hard foam board insulation that you just get at Home Depot. Stuff is cheap, it cuts with an X-Acto knife, it's really, really easy to work with. And then on top of that, I put a layer of Auralex foam that I got from Guitar Center. And the floor was a layer of that pink foam insulation and then a yoga mat that I cut up and layered on top of it. Now, I don't remember the exact cost of this build, but it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $200 to $250 for this box. And the most expensive part of that was definitely the Auralex. If I was doing this again, I would think twice about using Auralex. Instead, I would probably use Owens Corning 703. Now, if you're not familiar with Owens Corning 703, this is it. It's a fiberglass insulation that you can source at some hardware stores, but more than likely you're gonna have to order it online. 703 is amazing for its acoustic properties, and because of that, it's used in studios all over the place. Now, this stuff is not exactly cheap, but it does a much better job than Auralex of sound absorption. So if I was doing this box differently again, I would line the inside with 703 and then cover the inside with a fabric. Because this is a fiberglass insulation, you certainly don't want to be touching it. You don't want to be breathing it in every time you open the box. So you want to cover it in some kind of felt or burlap type material. So the amp I'm going to be using today is this, my 5E357 Tweed Deluxe. Now, this is a Mojotone amp kit build. If you want to see how I built this amp, you can check out this video here. I'm also going to be hitting it with a couple of pedals and a couple of different guitars so we can really test out the differences between the ISO box and the room. So with all that out of the way, let's start the comparison with the ISO box. Okay, so it's the next day. I wanted to give myself a little time to kind of give my ears a break and a rest, and also come up with an excuse to explain this continuity error. So I'm editing the video and comparing the two side by side for the first time, and the difference is more apparent than I honestly thought it would be. I'm actually pretty surprised. So immediately off the bat, the things I'm noticing are the ISO box is really cutting down the low end of the amp, and it's emphasizing the mid-range, I think specifically around 4 to 5K, that kind of brittle harshness that you can hear, especially when I'm playing slide, when I have the Jexteles Unidrive kicked in. It's really bringing out that kind of harsh kick in the mid-range. Whereas with the Room, it actually sounds pretty spot on to how the amp sounds and feels here in the room when I'm sitting next to it and playing it. You get a lot more low end. The mid-range response is a little more even and a little more tamed, but I am losing some top end clarity that I'm getting for whatever reason in the ISO box. Now, is that a bad thing? No, I've gotten some really killer sounds recording in that very ISO box, but it is apparent that it's changing the tone. Now, keep in mind, I took time to really make sure I nailed the mic placement between both sets. Where it was in the ISO box is where it was here in the Room. So the differences you're hearing should not be from mic placement differences, because I got them spot on. Now, in this kind of context, when you're just hearing the guitar by itself, having more low end and low mid range response is going to sound more pleasing. It sounds more full, sounds like the amp really in the room. But in the context of a mix, whether you're recording or playing live, most of that low end information is going to get cut out anywhere. And the reason you want to do that is so you're not competing with the low end information in the mix. The bass guitar, the kick drum, any low end synthesis or keys or anything you have going on. The guitar doesn't need to sit in that space. So I end up high passing all that low end information out anyways. So the fact that the ISO box is already pulling out that low end is not necessarily a problem for me. But with this particular ISO box, there are some pretty pronounced changes in the tone. I think it's subjective. You may love it, you may hate it. Let me know in the comments section down below. which do you like better, the amp in the room or the amp in the ISO box? Hope you enjoyed today's video. If you want to support the channel, check out the green room. It's linked down below. There you can sign up for monthly Skype sessions with me, download the original music that I write and produce for the channel here, and just be a part of the discussions and lessons that are happening over there every week. If you are a Helix or a Kemper user, I now have Helix presets and Kemper profiles available for download. Those will be linked down below as well. And there you can find links to all the social media and the gear that I like to use to make these videos. Anyways, hope you found this video informative and entertaining. I'm Rhett Shull. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you on the next one.